Welcome to The Independent Workforce, a podcast where we explore the now and the future of work through the lens of temporary employment, such as freelancers, contractors, fractional experts, you name it. Here we speak with CEOs, recruiters, founders, and industry leaders about how they work with independent talent, the wins, the challenges, and the lessons learned. My name is Yurii. I'm growing the freelancer market at freelancermap, an international platform that's been connected top independent professionals with companies for over 20 years. And my guest is Steve Rader, a true pioneer in open innovation and the future of work, who spent almost 36 years at NASA and for more than a decade guided its Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation, helping tap into the power of open talent and crowdsourcing to solve complex problems, who now, as the founder of Crowd Resource Consulting, continues to inspire organizations around the world to leverage collective intelligence, drive innovation, and rethink how we work together in a rapidly changing world. So welcome, Steve.
Oh, thank you so much, Yurii. Great
I
to be here.
I've heard so many things about you, and I can't wait to jump into this conversation and just ask you anything. And wow, 36 years in NASA. I've been in life itself for the same amount of years. So I'm curious, how does it feel to work so long with one company?
Oh, I loved my time at NASA. I got to do work in mission control and work on spacecraft and build software and communication systems and really work with some amazing people. NASA really employs some of the best people in the world, and working on space exploration, it's the dream. So I really enjoyed it. And then this last 10 years, it's kind of funny. I actually discovered open innovation in about 2010 when I read Jeff Howe's book on open innovation. And he's the Wired editor who kind of coined the term and wrote one of the early books about it. And I remember coming away from that book thinking, oh my gosh, we've now tapped into human intelligence in a new way, and NASA needs to use this. And shortly after that, I actually joined a bunch of crowds and started participating in the economy of the crowds. And a couple of years after that, I actually joined the part of NASA that was just forming to do open innovation and open talent. So and actually it formed around open innovation, and we actually expanded into open talent, and we can talk about that.
Tell me a little bit about the process of creation, this open innovation part in NASA, because what
Yeah,
I see right now, it's super hard for companies to change mindset of like
yeah,
kind of like working with people who you kind of own and
yeah,
tapping into this like bigger
for
picture.
sure.
Like, so how did it work back then?
Yeah, and for those that aren't familiar with open innovation, it's crowdsourcing, right? It's going out and trying to get ideas and solutions from people outside of your organization. And at NASA, it started with Jeff Davis, Dr. Jeff Davis, who ran the life sciences at NASA, all the human health and experimentation work, and he had a huge budget cut. And so he went out to industry to see how are organizations kind of retooling to do things better, faster, cheaper. And he found open innovation was being used in lots of companies. And so he did a trial, and it was very successful. Came back and said, okay, I want everyone to use this. And it was summarily rejected by the workforce. And in fact, there's a Harvard Business School case study called Houston, We Have a Problem, about NASA's rejection of open innovation. And over the years, we really looked at that to try to figure out what was going on there. And a lot of it has to do with the workforce. They came to NASA to be innovators. They are the experts in the field. And it felt a lot like, as a NASA worker, you don't get very many opportunities to exercise those innovation muscles. And when you do, the idea of outsourcing to someone who's not as well trained or qualified as yourself is not very appealing, right? And so that was kind of the framework of unconscious kind of rejection of the idea. And so we worked really hard on reframing this to say, look, going outside of the organization is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. We currently, and this is something we came to over time, but we took a step back and looked at what was driving the success of open innovation and what was driving this new drive to open talent, which we'll talk a lot more about. And what we found was the real driver is the pace of technology and the amount of technology that's hitting us. And one of the things I use in my presentations that I give is a kind of an informal study that somebody did at Harvard, but they did this estimate, and I believe it, which is based on kind of the population curve and where we are, that right now 90% of all scientists that have ever lived are alive. And think about that, that have ever lived, 90% are working now. So it's 9 times than ever existed previously, right? And they're working with these building block technologies like AI and, drones and CRISPR and all, just this plethora of really capable, complex technologies that they're using as the base. And so the result is this tsunami of technology that is coming, and changes are coming faster and faster, right? And when I say tsunami, people don't realize there's 1 million startups a day that are starting. So if only 1% of those succeed, that's 10,000 new companies a day. Um, and so if you're an innovator, if I go back to the NASA, if you're an innovator, the way you used to actually build the next generation of spacecraft or radio or whatever you would have all your experienced engineers you would talk to, you would go to some conferences and you would talk to the vendors, and you would have a pretty good lock on what the cutting edge technologies were that needed to go into your new innovation to make this a competitive design. That's not possible anymore. If you think you can Google the latest and greatest technology, then you really don't have a good appreciation for how expansive the world is right now in technology and how fast it's changing. I mean, just think about how many months it was from the first introduction of generative AI until everyone was using it. It was literally months, right?
Yeah.
Those adoptions used to take years. Um, and so what we talk about is open innovation and open talent are really trying to tap into people and the human networks that actually have knowledge about these technologies. So we say, look, if you want to actually be cutting edge, you have to tap into the experts, the technologies, and the ideas that are out there to be your starting point to be a good innovator. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're at high risk of a technology actually leapfrogging you without knowing. So you work and spend millions of dollars on some solution, and then suddenly there's another solution out there that's 5x faster or better than what you've got, and you've got to somehow throw away what you've got and move on, or it's very expensive, right? So that's the backdrop. And what we know out of open innovation is that open innovation acts as a statistical dragnet across all industries across the globe. And you can actually find those experts, ideas, and technologies much easier than any other mechanism. So that's where we are. Generative AI is playing catch up, and may start to overshadow on some of those, but it's going to be a while before they can actually understand the context. So that's where we started with open innovation. In 2015, we came across a platform. That ran open innovation contests, but their main job was freelancing, and it was freelancer.com out of Sydney, right? At the time, I think they had 4 million users. Spoiler alert, they're at 80 million plus users today. So that's actually roughly a little more than 1% of the world's population on one freelance platform. That's just crazy to me. But what we found is they were using contests and open innovation as a way to build reputation for freelancers. But it turned us on to this idea that these crowds that were being mobilized by digital platforms, right, and pulling together these large communities and matching them to opportunities, that was a growing area. And in fact, we found some studies that Upwork had sponsored through Edelman Intelligence that showed the people were moving into the freelance world at amazing numbers, to the point that they were projecting that there would be more people in the freelance economy than in the full-time work economy by 2027. And in fact, what we're seeing is, especially after COVID, that really jumped. That is continuing to happen. And that was really interesting to us because we were like, wait a second, if if half of the talent's going to not be in full-time jobs, how are we going to find them, right? And what we discovered as we dug further and further was many of the world's experts are not working for single companies anymore. They're starting to freelance. And that kind of movement is continuing, and it makes us think, okay, we need to find ways to actually use freelancers and gig economy if we're going to remain competitive, because all the expertise is moving so fast, right? The new technologies are moving, and the expertise to use those and leverage them are moving. So you kind of get into this situation where it's a race. And so I've come to the conclusion that if you're an organization and recruiting and retaining talent is your only talent strategy for full-time employees, then you're in trouble. You don't have a strategy to pull in freelancers, and the only thing you know is traditional HR of go out and recruit and retain your talent, then you will be stuck with a workforce that almost never has the cutting edge technology expertise you need. Whereas if you learn to kind of carve out a piece of your workforce that is actually coming from this open talent pool, then you can always access the expertise you need, because the crowd always has that expertise. Like, it's just statistically, they're always going to have that expertise you need. Whereas once you pull someone in, you now have limited them. You've limited their learning, their exposure to new technology, and they're going to be a lot more narrow in what they do. So that's kind of where I'm. By the way, I think many HR departments have kind of validated this problem with recruit and retain, because if you talk to a lot of HR folks right now, they'll tell you that they have a skills shortage, but a hiring freeze, right? So if you think about that, what's happening? Well, you're onboarding as many people as you can afford, but you still aren't able to get all the expertise, because the world is getting more complex and the skills needed are more fragmented, and therefore you're going to have this natural point. And part of it is there are skills that are expiring, and we don't have a good way to transition people to these new work. And this is really the area I get excited about, is the opportunity that freelancing provides for upskilling. Okay, I talked a lot here. I'll take a breath, Yurii, and then let you reset the conversation.
This episode of The Independent Workforce is brought to you by FreelancerMap, the home of freelancing. Whether you are looking to hire top freelance talent fast, or a freelancer ready to find your next big project, FreelancerMap connects the right people with the right work. No endless job boards, no guesswork, just direct access to verified experts and opportunities across the globe. Visit freelancermap.com and start building your next success story today. You know, you were talking about this technologies and all this AI stuff, and I still meet people who don't trust AI. Like, I won't use ChatGPT, I won't use any LLMs, any tools, because like, how can it know? Like, it doesn't know better, I know better, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, it's your choice. You can play with it, you cannot use it, but like, if you will be like out of job in like 2 years, it's up to you. And it's pretty much a similar situation with companies hiring freelancers and independent talent. They don't trust them. They want to control them, and they have no idea how to do it. They don't see how to ensure that freelancers are responsible, that they are bringing the project, they are bringing what they were hired to do, like how to communicate with them. It's so hard. Freelancers are not showing up to your like daily, each hour meetings. Nobody cares about those meetings. Like, it's a totally different way of working, and many companies, they have no idea how to do this. So I'm curious, how does this process work for you?
Yeah. Well, we very trend and started addressing those problems, because we were like, okay, NASA, US government, we were not ready to go out and hire freelancers. That just wasn't something that was done. And so we started really looking at, well, what are the issues, right? And some of them are simply contractual mechanisms for enterprises are kind of fixed. I don't know if you saw, but Upwork just 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, announced that they actually have kind of done work to adapt to those traditional contract models to make it easier for enterprises to hire. Because what you find is, when there's this new kind of work, there's 120 years of, systemic structure around full-time workers. And that's a good thing. Like that was a phase that we went through that was really good for workers. Unions were important. There were important ways to kind of get all that together. But as we move to this new, I truly believe open talent and freelancing is probably the biggest change to organizations in 120 years. People don't realize that it fundamentally changes how you work. And so we started looking at, well, what are the speed bumps? What are keeping people from using freelancers? Well, one is trust, right? You mentioned it, right? How do people trust them? I think there's technology coming in the terms of digital ID and kind of standardized background checks and the rest. But what we've discovered is, okay, well, let's talk to the platforms and let's find out what kind of vetting is done. Where can you look at reputation? How can you make sure you're not talking to a Russian hacker or somebody, right? And what we found, the freelance community actually values reputation overall, right? That's how you get your gigs. And so they keep a quite detailed history of who they've worked with and what they've delivered. And you can kind of get from that a little bit of the digital exhaust that we're going to start actually using as our CV in the future. And what you start to realize is, if you're worried about someone coming and working in your organization and stealing your IP, that you probably should worry about that engineer that's been with you for 25 years and has been passed over for, promotions, because he has a lot more motivation to sell your IP than a freelancer. Freelancers actually probably are more trustworthy in some cases, but it is still a concern. The other thing we've learned is, fine, there's a way to fence that. There's a way to actually kind of only give them work that they're not going to be exposed to the real critical stuff. And there's still a lot of work in your organizations that's not working on your proprietary work. I think the other thing is that people think of freelancing as only remote, faceless work, like, somebody who they've never met. And what we've been trying to explain to people is, look, yes, you can have that, and there are certain roles where that is useful, and there's probably people in your company you've never seen as well. But in that world, you can actually have a freelancer that you build a relationship with. Just because you use a freelancer on your team doesn't mean you can't build a relationship, have them understand your culture. There, you can even have a bench of people, right? You can say, look, I want to use a freelance marketer. And I find someone, I use them, and they learn my stuff. Well, maybe I actually do that with a couple of them so that if one's not available, I can use another. And you build a bench. We are finding more and more startups that out of the gate build these little labor ecosystems of freelancers. And a lot of those freelancers feel like they're part of that startup because they are, but they also do other things. And if you think about it, for a startup, that makes total sense, right? Why would you ever take on the load of 3 or 4, full-time employees when you can't afford it? So part of this is learning when do you need it, how do you flex, and how do you get those? There are more and more firms out there that are vetting talent, that are helping you to digitally match to the skills you need for the time frame you need, right? If you think about it, we've been doing this inside organizations forever, right? You go to start a new project. What's the first thing you do? You look around for who's available to put this team together to go work. And what's funny is you're kind of limited, right? Well, the best guy, he's over on this other project. I'm not going to be able to get him. Who else? And you're trying to scavenge and fit so that you get somebody who's good at the software and somebody who's good at the accounting or whatever. But you're putting these teams together and you're doing that matching from a very limited field of people. Right now, the focus there is, well, they have to come work for me if I tell them to. Well, sort of. There's other projects and other people competing for that talent. Now, if you think about it, if you can actually get anyone in the world, that you could bring in the world's experts, and you could find ways to kind of minimize the kind of coming up to speed, why wouldn't you do that, right? I look at a lot of companies who have kind of gone to the back in person, and there's some good reasons to have back in person, but not necessarily for everything, right? But think about how much you now are limited in the people that you can recruit. If recruit and retain to come work in person is your model, you've taken the number of people that are in the pool that are eligible, and you've gone from a worldwide and you've brought it down to people that are willing to come and live and work in your city and meet your requirements. And it's very limiting. And what we're finding is as more and more experts are moving to the gig economy, that pool is much richer than most organizations realize. If you go to companies and look through the portfolios of people at Upwork or TopTal or Maven or Freelancer, what you find is, oh my gosh, we when we were at NASA, one of the first freelancers that we hired through we actually got freelance platforms onto a contract, which then allowed us to bring them, is somebody was looking simply to have someone who could help data scientists transition their algorithms into operational software, right? So it wasn't super complex, wasn't we needed a world expert. But I remember we were able to get someone who already had worked in the government for NOAA, for the National Atmospheric and Weather folks. And basically, she had been a presidential innovation fellow. Like she had been literally at the top of government and been one of the key talent. And she wanted to do this because she had a real passion for software and software teams. And we were able to get her fairly inexpensively in work. And that's the other thing. You can get really amazing talent because you're only buying it by the yard, right? You're only buying what you need, which we're finding even helps us in our upskilling, right? So if you've got a team and they don't have anyone who has quantum sensing experience, well, okay, let's go bring in for, a few hours of meetings, someone who is an expert in quantum sensing and see if that's something we need to include. All of a sudden, my team now understands what quantum sensing is when they didn't a few weeks ago, right? So you can use that work augmentation to actually upskill everyone to some degree in your organization. So we get very excited about it. The other pieces, we actually started to demonstrate on the NASA team hiring freelancers. We had a very uneven workflow. So towards the end of the year, we would get a ton of people wanting to do open innovation projects. And so we basically, through our contract mechanism, hired 3 freelancers through Ensemble from Upwork, right? And they came in, they could only work like up to halftime. But what the idea was we could scale. So we could bring them in, train them, and then really use them to kind of even out our labor curve. And it worked spectacularly. We included them in our meetings. We included them in our culture. That we had to pay some overhead for that because we wanted them to be part of what we were doing. But they very much were some of the best people we could get. They became part of our team. And honestly, I don't think anyone thinks of them any differently. We were very upfront with, hey, you're our scalable resource, right? So we want you to not do just our work. We want you to go be a real freelancer doing other work. We will have clauses to kind of help with that flexibility so that you get our work and yours and you can fit the rest of your freelance career in. But that wasn't hard to do. That ended up almost never coming up. It was amazing how they were passionate and they could legitimately say they were part of the NASA team. And that goes a long way, right? People really want to be part of some cultures and it gives them a great reputation builder, right? In crowdsourcing, right? In open innovation, we talk about 4 kind of reasons people participate in challenges. It's gold, guts, glory, and good, right? They want to get paid, especially if you're a money-making enterprise. But there's also like reputation. They want to be able to take what they've learned and use that as qualification for more. Guts is really, some people just really like the work and the hard work of solving problems. And then kind of the good being they want to contribute. And for a lot of people, helping with the NASA program and helping with space exploration is a kind of human good that we want to be a part of. And so it's really amazing how that all works. We can talk more about that.
I can imagine when you hire a freelancer and you gave them both like freedom and inspiration. So basically they're free to work with NASA and also with other companies. And then they also can tell them like, hey, we're working on this like spaceship project, or we are working on that. Can you imagine that we are working with this company? So it's kind of like double power. And also there are two more moments that I kind of had on my mind while you were talking, and about like getting freelancers and saving money on them. So I immediately imagined when you want to buy a car, you go to somewhere, and then they tell you, yes, you can buy this car, but it also comes with a garage, with this house, and also the whole supply team. So otherwise, you can't buy a car. And freelancer is like, yeah, you take this car, just go whatever you want and like use
Yeah.
this. And also from the other point about recruiters who are not tapping into the world of freelancing, they are still building network of
Yeah.
full-time experts. But how often do you go there and hire specifically those full-time experts? They joined the company like for a year or 2 or 3 years or even more. They will be not available at all on the market. Like why do you build those network? You can build network of freelancers and they have
Yeah.
like 3, 6, 12 months projects. And then you can like, it's so
Yeah.
much faster turnover, and
Right.
you can so much easier to get everywhere you want. And also, to your point, I have two questions, but let's start with first. You told about that you worked through platforms, and I'm curious, why through platforms? Why
Yeah.
didn't you work with freelancers like one to one?
Sure. Well, it's a discovery problem, right? And honestly, we were coming from a platform world of open innovation, and that's where we found freelancing. So for us, we were starting to see the power of online community. So we call them curated crowds, where people can join a platform, but often they were joining to kind of have a community of other people that have that passion, so they can have the dialogue about best methods to do things and how to build algorithms or whatever. So, but also to learn, right? That it's a learning platform. So if you look, one of the platforms we used early on and still use is Topcoder. Topcoder is 1.8 million software developers and coders who, yes, there are contests on that platform. But if you look at that platform, same with Code Wars, there's several others where what they're doing is focusing on learning and learning from each other and connecting as a network of talent, and then getting opportunities to put that learning to the test with contests, right? And what Topcoder did successfully was, okay, the, these folks are learning how and very successfully putting together high quality code and data algorithms. Let's make that service available to companies. And what was interesting is they were using some of their crowd as freelancers to run the contests, to be co-pilots and be the project managers. And so we saw this kind of hybridization, but we really saw this that people were using AI more to kind of match need to a solution, and that was talent, right? And you kind of need a platform, even if you're going to go out and look for a freelancer on your own. How are you going to do that? You're going to have to use LinkedIn. You're going to have to use Indeed. You're going to have to use something. And what we found, and what I believe, is that what the change we're going through, right, is that because of this rapid change, organizations need to actually kind of peel off a function that they had for at least a portion of their workforce. And if you think about it, that was really run by HR and managers, right? The HR was there to go find the talent and maybe help train it. The managers were there to fully utilize that talent in service of the organization, right? But then they had a side job, which was to develop the people and make sure they were happy, right? Which I always felt was a little bit of a, there's always been a tension within organizations between labor and what the company is trying to do, because companies are there to make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what they're designed to do. But they're not designed to also make people happy. They often find that helpful in keeping their workforce. So if you want to retain them, you keep them happy. You try to actually keep them educated. But whenever there's a clash of those two things, right? You see really kind of ugliness comes out. That's where strikes come from. That's where people, and you find a lot of people feel kind of chained to their organization because that's where they get their health care. That's where they get their paycheck. That's what we're seeing here is, as that peels off to other freelance mechanisms, then the developmental pieces can really focus, and this is why platforms become important, that the platforms that help freelancers to keep up with the trends on education, to get good opportunities, to match, to have agency so that they can pick and choose. People can pick, if you pick a task that's not going to be enjoyable, but you know you can do it and make money, but that's where you are in your life, and you know you're not finding the jobs that make you happy. When you make the choice to do something hard and make money, that's a very different thing than someone saying, look, I don't have anything else for you, go do this crappy work, right? Because they also need that work that's not very much fun done, but you just get directed to, and you have no agency. So agency is, I think, a huge factor and a huge piece of this trend of people moving into the freelance world. I'll just add one little stat that came out of that Edelman intelligence study. They polled freelancers and people that were doing full-time freelancing, right? And they said, how much money would it take for you to come back and work in an organization? You know, and how would that work? And they had kind of rankings of this much money, this much money. What was surprising was half of those freelancers polled said that there was no amount of money you could pay them to come back and work in an organization, right? That's a significant shift of why people want to be into it. I tell people that Dilbert cartoons are real in that they reflect worker sentiment for a large number of workers. Not everyone, like there's a lot of people that are happy and get to do what they want in organizations, but the vast majority of the working public or the working workforce, they basically feel like they just have to be there and this is how they have to work there, and they're miserable because they have no agency, because their development is stagnant. They feel like they're going to be dropped at any time by layoffs. They feel like technology is passing them by. In the freelance world, people are upskilling on their own. They're kind of finding the jobs, and platforms are enabling them to match at higher and higher frequencies and find jobs. If you go to, like, Michael Burdick runs Paro IO, I think, or Paro AI, I forget which the piece is, but it's a finance and accounting crowd of freelance. He only hires, I think, 3 or 4% of applicants, but they're freelancers, and he uses AI to match them to tasks that are being assigned. And he asks you, how you tell me as a freelancer, how many hours a week do you want to work? What kind of work do you want? And what kind of development do you want? And those settings actually get you your assignments. And what's remarkable is they're focused on kind of getting better and better. So they don't match the task to the best qualified. They match to the least most qualified so that someone who's just learned how to do something gets to actually do it. They still know how to do it and their quality is still checked, but they actually get experience doing that right after they learn it. So every time someone's assigned a new task, they're actually moving up in their skills, which, you know, if organizations had been doing that all along and really been skill forward, I don't think they would be in the mess they're in.
You know, it's also, you told about amount of money you need to pay for people to come back to work for company. We've done a similar study at freelancermap, like freelance study in 2025, and over 80% of freelancers told that if they were currently full-time, they would start freelancing again. So yeah, some people, of course, for some it doesn't work. It's not like for everyone, but most of them, they are definitely motivated. They love what they're doing. And also they treasure this freedom of working with different clients, and not just working with different clients, but also like bringing this multifaceted experience into all the projects that they are creating, and like they love creating. And also, you know, you already told so many amazing things about independent talents and the future of work. And I believe that you've had many great examples at NASA of how it worked out. But let's see the dark side of the moon. Let's explore it. So tell me a story when some of relationships and some of freelancer relationship went wrong. So what did you do and what did you learn back then?
Yeah, so let's see. When we first brought on our 3 freelancers to the team, we had 1 month set aside for them to kind of come up to speed. And, you know, we were getting to know them. We were trying to understand them. And there was one freelancer who seemed very promising. In fact, seemed the most promising when we hired them. But over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we just found that they weren't as responsive. They kept kind of dropping things. We started having to have conversations to clarify, and it still wasn't working. But I think it was right at 1 month, we basically said, we had actually a face to face, and we said, look, we gave that 1 week of face to face to kind of say, well, maybe that would be the thing. And we said, you know what, this isn't working. And we were able to basically swap them out very quickly. And within another month, we had somebody up to speed. It's funny too, the speed at which we were able to get someone was literally a few 2 or 3 weeks. And then we were able to start. If you look at what HR takes to bring on somebody new, finding someone is, a 3 to 9 month process, right? And that the velocity that which we could actually get someone in really helped us to not, we didn't spend a lot of cycles figuring out that that wasn't a fit. But it's just like anything else, right? That there is a fit that you're trying to make. And even when someone looks great on paper, they don't always fit, right? And there's sometimes just an impedance mismatch. I'm sure that freelancer is going to do great in their career, but it just wasn't a match for how we operated, right? And I would say that human dynamic doesn't go away in the freelance world, but the velocity at which you can try and fail is, an order of magnitude or more faster than the full-time employment model for that, right? If it takes you 6 to 9 months to bring someone in, you're going to spend 3 or 4 months at least trying before you get rid of them, because, hey, you already invested so much in bringing them in. And in fact, part of the reason that 3 to 6 months process takes so long is we're so afraid of getting someone in who's not a good match because it takes so long. And it's this kind of vicious cycle. We make a longer cycle so that we're more selective, but then we still have mismatches. It's kind of a vicious cycle there. So I think part of this is how do we, and this is what I think the core of the entire issue is. This isn't a freelance versus full-time. This is really how do we need to change the way we do business? And that means how we utilize talent in a world that is moving at a rate that is really unfathomable just a decade ago, right? There's a great chart I use that talks about the average lifespan of organizations, and in the early 1900s, it was 90 to 100 years. And these weren't all organizations. These were like the S&P 500, right? So our most successful organizations averaged a lifespan of 90 years. Fast forward to today, it has been declining every decade, and is now that average has gone from 90 years to 14 years. Now, that is because things are changing, right? And we've been able to change a lot of things, but we really haven't had to change the workforce that much. Now we're getting into a situation where the expertise and the talent required has to be changed enough, and you have to be able to bring in the right folks. But I caution people from thinking black and white, full-time, freelance. Think of it as a blurring of the lines of who you utilize. Because on the full-time side, right, even today, many more people are freelancing on the side. And most organizations don't realize that. Now, at NASA, legally, I had to go to the lawyers and get approval, and I did. As soon as I figured out, hey, NASA, what I'm doing expands beyond what NASA's interests are. And so there's other people that are interested in this. And my kids were out of school, and so I had more time. I said, I want to go do speaking and consulting on this area. Can I do that? And what was funny is, as soon as I started doing that, I started learning so much more about what other industries are doing and I was actually able to bring that information back and help NASA with that information.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, really a lot of organizations that are struggling with the upskilling and keeping people up to date on what's happening in the world. You don't only think of, I need to go hire some freelancers. Think about how can you actually provide your workforce an opportunity to actually, a sliver of their time say, hey, in 5% of your time, or maybe 0% of time, I'm just going to give you permission to go out there and try open innovation challenges and open talent work. But here's a signed agreement that you agree not to share our intellectual property. You won't, whatever your agreement needs to be, whether they can use your computers or not, you can decide, and what hours of the day, just like we used to do with remote work, right? We did that kind of free form at first, and then we started coming up with these agreements. And then say, hey, every 6 months, it's not a requirement that you benefit the organization, but every 6 months, come and report back to us on what you've learned and how you think that has helped you in your job here. And I think what you'll start to find, especially if you give people a little bit of training on how to get on these platforms, how to actually find work, and what they can do, is they're not going to leave the company, because the company, they have a full-time job. That's valuable still, right? Because we're still kind of teasing out all the different benefits and everything. There's value in that, but you're going to see that they're motivated by making some money, learning some new things, and actually getting some agency. And so I've been advising that now for several years, saying, look, if you want to upskill your folks, picking a course isn't your best bet. Giving them some credits on Coursera and getting some agency to go out there and learn from the rest of the world is a really important piece.
I was smiling for when you were saying about this, because I listened and it sounded to me like a fairy tale, because I bet that 90% of companies will create extra work, extra meetings,
Yeah,
extra stuff just to keep people busy. They will never let them do something on the side. And I feel
right.
like it's a huge mindset shift that has to happen, so that like, okay, so there is more than one way to be right. You can go
Yeah,
and try different things. And it clearly brings you more expertise back, as in your example that you learned and you brought this expertise back to NASA. So you didn't like go like, okay, I'm leaving it, I'm go. Maybe sometimes it's also a good thing to understand that people have this freedom, they start trying to think and they live in your company.
yeah.
Maybe you are doing something wrong, but once again, I feel like it's such a huge risk for companies to
Well,
take that I have no idea who will even try that.
but think about it. If upskilling, and HR knows this, that upskilling is their biggest challenge, right? How do they get the accountants that are about to get laid off transitioned into data scientists? How do they get, how do they deal with that? And what you find is companies kind of on average budget about $1,000 per year per employee for. Now that's never going to get you data scientists out of it. Like, so they're faced with a really a challenge to transition their workforces to something that they need, but they can't possibly afford to do that. And so what I'm proposing here is basically a free training program that allows people agency on what they learn, is likely going to keep a good chunk of them, because they're going to, this is a benefit, and so they're not going to necessarily leave. Again, people leave anyway in this world, right? And it is incentivized by money. Like, they could make money doing this, the individual can, at no cost to the company, right? In fact, the
Yeah.
company could get rewards for that, of a better trained workforce, and so this experience from the outside. So to me, there's a monetary model that, if you really look at it and you go, well, how can I not afford to do this? This is even if it's, I'm not going to give up any time of my employees. You could, even if you say, look, this would have to be on your own, but we give you permission and do it in this framework. If nothing else, it directs what people are already doing, because they're already like, if you look at the numbers, there are a ton of people that are full-time employees that are working open innovation and open talent on the side,
Yeah.
not approved. Nobody knows about it. And I know this because on open innovation, we had winners that worked for major corporations, so it's out there for sure.
Yeah, I have so many questions and I feel like we just started this conversation and I really wish to have the sky is the limit, but time is the limit. So the final question for now. What advice would you give to a company considering hiring freelancers for the first time?
For the first time, I would find some work that you're struggling to staff. And not that you want to necessarily replace, maybe it's marketing, because the world's a very different marketing place. Maybe it's in a particular high-tech area. Maybe there's a new technology that's starting that you're considering, and just get with your legal and get with your procurement and say, look, this stuff is happening. We need to figure out how to do this and challenge them. Because if you just go to your legal department and say, hey, I want to go hire a freelancer, they'll say no, right? Because you're not asking them to help you. You're asking them, can I? And in their framework, no one's done it and therefore no. And so you really want to kind of say, hey, we want to go explore this. We need to bring in experts in these kind of ways. And we want to try out, several platforms in this to see what that's like and how quickly can we get this. And then, have someone who kind of reads up on this and is an expert or becomes a little bit of an expert in what are the platforms that I need to be looking at? How can I get with them? Start some relationships, start talking to these platforms, and then try to do it. Don't try to do everything self-serve on these platforms. Contact them, contact Upwork, contact Freelancer. They have enterprise help desks, if you will. They want to help organizations find that adapter piece. There's also groups like Open Assembly. I think you said you're going to maybe bring in John Windsor. He runs Open Assembly. It is a group of people who have both platforms and enterprises, and they're trying to work on how do we best get that new adaptation. Because again, companies have had 100+ years to figure out how to use full-time talent. So and in fact, all of our legal system is set up for that. So you've started to see over the last 4 or 5 years, battles between Uber and cities and those kind of things. These are the growing pains of this transition. It's not that they're going to stop the transition. It's just people really have vested interests on both sides, and we're trying to figure out, oh, there's this new world. I'll give you an example. There's a limit to freelancers can only work up to, I think, 20 hours a week in the US. Otherwise, you have to pay them benefits. Well, that rule is there so that companies won't just get freelancers and not have to pay benefits. But it's actually damaging freelancers now, the very people it was trying to protect, because now they can't actually work. And most of them are kind of beyond they don't care about the benefits anymore. They've already been figured out how to pay for those and leaving. And so what we really need to have happen is kind of universal decoupling of benefits from companies, rather than, because they were always put in there as an incentive to keep you to stay, right? Well, legally that ended up getting into the system. Probably what needs to happen is all of that needs to be teased apart so that we can have equity of the workforce that can actually bob and weave. I'll leave you with this. I really think as the world gets faster and faster, and it's not going to slow down, is that this new way of working is likely to be the thing that saves the workforce, because it provides a construct where people can actually upskill faster, much, much faster than in the traditional. We can talk about that at some point. It actually gives them agency and the ability to get the work that feeds them most and gets them what they need, whether that's low level work or high level work. And it actually provides a framework that is so much more efficient for business, that business is going to get there. Because I think you said you guys have done analysis, I've done analysis. The efficiency of using to task labor is so much better than having the overhead of unutilized, ill-fit talent. There's no comparison. You can literally pay a freelancer twice as much as you do your full-time employee and still come out ahead because of the overheads that you're not paying. Like, it's crazy what the economics are in a lot of fields. So I think it's coming, and it's I think potentially, if done right, going to be the thing that helps us as a society adapt to this faster change.
I feel like we are just touching the surface of how it works. So because there are so many details of what to talk to, and I believe that we'll definitely have volume 2 or maybe 3, 4, who knows, at some point, to dive into this nitty-gritty of how to exactly do it. And last but not least, name 2 people I should reach out to talk about the independent workforce.
Yeah, let's see. I think Diane Finkhausen would be a good person for you to talk to. She used to run open innovation and open work for General Electric, and she's now consulting. But she has she was actually working as part of a contract to NASA to provide a podcast of experts. And over the last, I think, couple of years, she's had a podcast that actually brings these freelance experts from around the world, and they are literally world's experts. And she just has a way of actually tapping into talent that's pretty amazing. I think the other, because you already said you're bringing in John Windsor, so I don't want him to count as one of mine, but although just because you've already got him, is Brendis Henriksen. She was my first contact at freelancer.com and kind of the person I worked with out of Vancouver. And she now has a remote work platform that really helps workers to kind of do that freelancing from remote. And it's a pretty impressive setup that she's got going. So I think those two would be good. I know a lot of people in this space, so those are the two that came to mind.
That's the hardest part, to choose out of like the hundreds of thousands of
Right.
people. And what is the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is usually the best way. It's easy. You can just look me up. You can find my face. It's easy. If you put in Steve Rader and NASA, you'll find me. And it's pretty easy.
Got it, Steve. So first of all, huge thank you to Mina Bastavros
Yeah.
for
Oh,
connecting
Mina.
us.
What
And
Mina's done at Airbus is amazing. I treasure my relationship with Mina because he has the energy of 10 people. It's amazing.
And of course, a huge thank you, first of all, for what you are doing for making this world better, the like building the future of work, for sharing your experience and explain on how to touch this and to work with this independent talent, with this freelance workforce, how to make the world a little better place for everyone, not just freelancers, but also companies and also economists, because it's all intersected, interconnected. And a huge thank you for having this amazing conversation. I'm super happy that we've met, first of all. And secondly, you've shared so many nuggets of wisdoms that I still have so many thoughts in my mind. I need to just go and just write down everything, not to forget. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing all this information and like doing what you are doing.
Oh, thank you so much, Yuri. I love your energy. I love what you're doing. I love this podcast. So thank you so much for having me on.
And yeah, see you in the freelance world. And for listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Independent Workforce. I hope you've taken one step closer to working smarter with freelance talent. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to learn even more and share it with your colleague. And remember, the future of work is now.